Matt here in the Service Core studio. Today's episode of Toilet Talk is all about buying or selling a portable sanitation business. Our guest is Damon Powell from FMC Advisors. They have over 150 completed transactions under their belt, and today Damon's going to share with you everything you need to know about buying or selling a portable sanitation business. Let's get back in the booth and get this started. Damon, welcome to the inside of our studio. What do you think?
I never would have guessed from the outside that it's this big on the inside.
Yeah, we got it made really nice and roomy for everyone. So, well, Damon, thank you so much for being with us today. You know, this topic is one that I think is on a lot of people's minds of, mergers and acquisitions. There's all sorts of words that get thrown around, acronyms that get thrown around, and I think there's a lot of confusion, and you bring a lot of clarity to that confusion. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why we started FMC Advisors. I saw over the years there was a lot of confusion, and we try to bring a real practical, down to earth, really make it as simple as we can for our clients.
Nice. All right, so we're going to start off by, let's cover the landscape here and demystify some of these, terms that are being thrown around. So yeah. Can you tell us, what's the difference between a strategic, a regional, or a private equity, in this space?
Yeah, of course. And the portable sanitation space has got very popular over the past few years. The strategics in the industry are basically United Site Services and United Rentals. They're the quasi nationwide operators. Kind of below that is you've got some regional operators that have multiple locations, maybe across state lines. Some have as many as 20 locations. Examples of those could be a Honey Bucket out west, a Blue Site Solutions in the southeast, a Texas Outhouse in Texas. So you've got that level of operator out there that have grown by acquisition also. And then you've got private equity or other investment firms that are looking to get into the industry. And we've seen this across many industries over the past few years. Self-storage is another one. Private equity got involved. So these are firms that have raised money specifically to buy companies in a certain industry. Typically, they're going to like the owners to stay on because they don't have the subject matter experts on how to run the business, but they like buying into the business, bringing some business savvy to it, help try to make it a little more profitable. And then some of those are going to want to sell that 3 to 5 years down the road and get their return back. And then kind of a fourth one is individual investors that may have been in the business before. Maybe they've been in the solid waste business and they just like the industry. They're also kind of that fourth type of buyer that are looking to acquire companies in the portable sanitation space.
Nice. So thanks for clearing that part up. And, the next part that usually comes after this is, if I'm buying a business or I'm selling it, what's it worth? And there is a not so secret formula out there that we could talk to the audience about to just set everyone's minds at ease and make it easy. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all start businesses to create an income or a profit, right? And you're going to hear the term EBITDA, EBITDA, but it's all kind of a metric that if you were looking at different companies in different industries, you could compare the profitability of a solid waste company to portable sanitation, a dry cleaner, a pizza place, doesn't matter what it is. You can kind of work the financials to, if you're looking at investing in some business, where is my investment going to do better? So really what it is, it's your top line revenue minus all your expenses, and then a few adjustments in there. And in our industry, a lot of times you've got what we call owner add backs, okay? And that may be if a new business is going to run your company moving forward, perhaps you're paying yourself an above market rate. I'll use an example. If I'm running the company and I pay myself $150,000 a year, if I leave, you might be able to replace me with a operations manager that makes 80,000 a year. So there's a savings there. That would be an adjustment. So what we try to get to is that bottom line net income cash flow number that is very attractive to a potential new buyer. And one of the things most important when selling a business is working with someone like a CPA or someone like myself that have done this a lot, that can work through your P&Ls for the past few years, profit and loss statements, to really find out what that number is, because the number that you pay taxes on or report to the IRS is not always that adjusted number that a new buyer is interested in. So, and then once we identify what that annual number is, and you try to look for some trends, it's great if it's getting better every year, but we look at that number, and then that's what the multiple, if you hear multiples, it is a multiple of that annual EBITDA or annual adjusted net income that a potential buyer is going to offer you for your business. One of the myths that we've had to dispel over the years is people hear multiples and they believe it's a multiple of my revenue. Hey, I'm doing 2 million a year in revenue. I hear our businesses sell for 5 times. Is that 5 times my 2 million? My company's worth $10 million. Well, sometimes we have to dispel that myth with our clients. No, it's a multiple of that annual earnings potential for your business.
Got it. Yeah, that makes it pretty clear. What are you seeing today for multiples for both? I think, our audience, some folks have portables and they run a product line of dumpsters or whatever. In those two camps, where do you see the multiples today, and how do you see that changing maybe in the near future?
That's a great question, Matt. And at FMC Advisors, we do have clients in both the roll-off, solid waste space, and portable sanitation. So we do stay up on the multiples. And then if your company is a mixture of both, obviously it can be a mixture of those multiples. But typically, and I'm going to deal with companies in $1 million in revenue or more, all the way up to 20 million a year or more. You're seeing multiples in that 4 to 8 range. And obviously that's a huge range, but we'll talk later in the spot here about what moves those multiples one way or another. But that's a pretty typical range. And just for comparison, the average multiple of all companies in the United States that sell is about 6.5, and that's every type of business, all size. So we see our businesses kind of right in the middle, maybe a little lower depending on the type of business that you're in. But that's what we're seeing out there. And what are we seeing going forward? We're in October 2022 right now. There's a lot of things going on in our economy and the world. I think the general consensus is multiples are going to soften a little bit, and one of the major factors in that is the cost of borrowing. So as the Fed has raised interest rates, that makes it a greater cost to borrow. So anyone borrowing to buy your business is going to have a greater cost there. And it's just an age-old adage that as interest rates go up, multiples have to soften a little bit. That's why we saw really high multiples over the past couple of years, because interest rates were hovering around 0 and 2 to 3%. So the cost to borrow was cheap. But we are historically seeing the highest multiples that our industry has ever seen. Even if it softens a little bit, it's still a very strong multiple.
Got it. And is there a difference that you see between private equity or strategic, right, in the last year or so?
Again, another great question. And I think there's so many factors that to answer that question, that it really gets down to your business and where you're at. And a quick example is, if I'm a private equity company, and there's a lot out there trying to buy into our industry right now, they may be looking at a specific area of the United States. They may be willing to pay up a little bit to get their first platform deal. And when I say platform, what that means is, a platform acquisition is typically generating 2 to 5 million in annual earnings, not top line revenue, 2 to 5 million in annual net income or earnings. And that is, they call that a platform that I can get started with in the industry, and then I can grow from there. So you could see, a private equity company paying a little higher multiple than a strategic, right now to get into the industry. And we've seen that in a few areas across the United States. There's been competition for the premier operators. And I think that will be the case going forward, really as far as I can see going, because one of the misconceptions coming from other industries is private equity. They kind of believe that there's hundreds of restroom operators in that platform category, and they quickly find there's not. So there's good companies out there, good companies that really, may not be for sale, but there's some competition for those that I think will kind of keep the multiples for those premier companies at the higher end.
Got it. Thank you for answering that so well. So let's think about it this way. There's probably two camps of listeners right now. Ones that are looking to buy a business and grow their service area, and then ones that are looking to sell their business. So let's start off first with, if you're looking to buy a business, what are some of the pros and cons of that, and talk about, what those people should be looking for in those businesses.
Sure, I'd be happy to. When we look at growing by acquisition or buying a company, a couple things come to my mind. It's a faster growth. If I'm buying a company that has 8 trucks and 2,000 units on the street, that's a quicker growth than if I try to do it organically and hire my own sales reps, or maybe I'm the one out there trying to build the business. So, faster growth is one of the advantages. Two, you could expand your service area. Maybe you're already established in one spot, you want to expand your service area because your clients are saying, hey, we love what you do in, Raleigh, could you come over to Charlotte, right? So you could grow that way to really expand your service area. And one is, you grow, you can eliminate a competitor. And sometimes that's a good thing for a market. I've been part of it on both sides that, maybe you've got that, and we see it in the Facebook groups. There's the low baller out there, right? Why are they doing it for X amount? Well, if someone comes in and buys that low baller, it can help the entire market. So those are three quick, positives I think about, growing by acquisition. And a fourth one I'll throw in there is because equipment has been so hard to source over the past couple of years. You may have a competitor that's underutilizing equipment. They may have extra trucks or extra units that they're not utilizing. So that's been a growth strategy that I've seen used, and some of our clients have benefited from that over the past 12 months.
Great. And so, those are some of the positives, but there's also the buyer beware. What should they be looking for? And maybe, I know you've got some good stories. Could you share a fun story of the buyer beware?
I think one of the most important things in my career that I always look at is how is the fit, right? You hear about mergers and acquisitions all the time in other industries, right? Software and, lots of different industries. And I think they really view the fit. What's the culture of my company versus the company that I'm looking at buying? So I think that's important. One quick one, I was in a potential transaction where the buyer just felt that the level of service and the way that they had run their family-run company for a long time, they were looking at purchasing another company. They just thought it was too much of a heavy lift to maybe change the mindset of that potential acquisition from, we do okay service. And, I think when you walk the yard of a potential company, it tells you a lot about how they run their business. And, we can talk a little about this later, but, yard organization, if everything's where it's supposed to be, you make a mental leap to how they run their company. And I've got a really good client now where you go to the yard and there are lines painted on the blacktop and everything goes within a line. And I walk into a company like that, I'm like, this is fantastic, right? Mm-hmm. That's how I ran my businesses. If you're somewhere in between there, that there's room over there, shove it in the corner, people are going to make an assumption when they walk on there. So back to my story, the buyer did not go through the transaction because they just felt that the transition time and the leap from the culture of their company that was run like spotless to the one that was not as spotless, it just didn't work out. So there are times when just, the appearance of your yard can have a negative effect. So that's one thing. Customer retention is another I'm not going to say con, but I think you have to look at, if I'm going to buy a company, I want all the clients, I want all the customers, I want all the past customers. So I think you have to ask yourself, what is my plan to retain these clients? And if I don't feel I'm going to have a good customer retention, that could be another red flag. And another quick story, I'll be brief here, but if you look at a company, that company came in and took a lot of your clients for whatever reason, right? Maybe you don't want those clients back. Maybe they were the price jumpers anyway. So say, hey, company A wants to sell, and it'd be nice, but if I buy my old clients back, what am I getting? Are they just going to leave it? So a couple things there that I would just keep in mind as you're looking at potentially purchasing another provider.
Yep, great points. I think one that stood out to me was the culture that you have. If you're in a position to buy a business, you probably have a really good culture and processes in place. And so you have to think about, can this business that I'm purchasing, can we fit it into our processes and into our culture? And if that's not a good fit, you're going to be shoving things together that may not work very well for you in the future. So along those lines, if we switch camps now and we say, okay, if you're a business that's thinking about selling,
Sure.
and maybe you really do have great process and you have a great culture, I've heard you talk about the story that a business tells, and that really plays into selling your business. Can we start there?
Of course. No, and I'm passionate about what I do, and that's why I have so much fun. I'm glad you had me on here. So it's true. A business is more than just the black and white numbers on a spreadsheet. We've talked about revenue and net income and adjusted EBITDA, right? But at the end of the day, there's that piece of it. But there is the human aspect, which I really enjoy about the portable sanitation and the solid waste industry. Why people got into the business. So I think the story that we tell and how we work with our clients is we really I want to become experts in their business really quick so that I can transfer that enthusiasm to potential new buyers, right? The story of how we got started, where we are now, what our plans are going forward, and then even for the new buyer saying, okay, you have greater resources, look where you could take it. Very common in our industry is, I say mom and pop because that's how that's referred to. It's not derogatory. It's just, and lots of industries refer to the smaller operators as mom and pops. They're passionate about what they do. They work 80 to 100 hours a week, and they can't grow that business anymore, right? So by moving that to a potential new buyer, that buyer can then add more resources. Maybe they add another line of business. Maybe it's temporary fence. Maybe it's storage. So I think the story that you tell, that we got from point A to point B where we are now, and we see us getting to point C, but this potential new buyer can help us get there. So I think that's kind of when we talk about the story, that there's great stories to tell out there, and businesses have a kind of a life of their own. And when you can portray that to potential new buyers and find the right fit, because one of the things that are important to me at our company is the perfect exit for an owner, and that's different for everybody. And we don't assume what that is. One of my first questions is always, how can I help? And then, what's your exit look like? So, and then we kind of tell the story to get to that next level about how do we best maximize the value for a client, and then, how do we find the right buyer? Because, in a lot of instances, I ask my customers, are there anybody that you don't want to sell to? And is there anybody that you think we should? So again, it all goes back to, you take the numbers, you take the market area, you take, the different lines of business, and that's all part of the story. So I think that's kind of that's what's important, and that's what buyers are really looking for. Help us understand quickly the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly about a potential sale. And then, you'll hear me say a lot, the transactions happen when the timing and the value line up. When I've got clients that, hey, I don't want to sell right now, even if they offered me, a room full of money, because I'm loving growing my business. So timing and valuation line up, a great story maximizes the value.
Got it. What if, if you're that business today that's thinking about, I have an exit plan, I've inherited this business for generations, I'm ready to pass it on, and, I've got it to a point where I'm ready to walk away. What are the things that they should be doing for their business and in their business to make it more attractive? We'll start there and then we'll move on to what are the things they should clean up if they're doing that may not make it as attractive.
Yeah, one other thing is, and I see this predominantly in our industry, is just run a great business, right? You're in it. We are a service business. There's a rental component, and sometimes there's a disconnect that people think this is a rental business. It's a service business with a rental component. So number one is just run a great business, the best that you can with the resources that you have, right? So I think that's first and foremost, and that will in itself make itself attractive. I think it's John Wooden, the famous basketball coach for UCLA, said, he really never looked at what his competitor was doing. He says, if I focus on what I'm supposed to do on our offense, we will be unstoppable. We'll let the competitors spend their time figuring out how they're going to compete with me. So I think there's plenty of truth to that. So I think if you do that and run a great business, that helps. And then it's having solid financials, right? And QuickBooks is fine. For the smaller operators out there, QuickBooks is fine. 95% of the people use QuickBooks. Everybody's familiar with it, so that's good. So keep solid financials. That's fine. I think that's very important. I would say invest in equipment as much as it's financially possible for you. The benefits beyond just having good equipment is less downtime, less customer service interruptions. And, I spent 10 years at Waste Management really learning the ins and outs of business, and people underestimate the cost of downtime of having a truck down, the number of calls it creates and the number of customer service interruptions. So I think investing in equipment as much as you can, having solid processes and a software system such as Service Core, again, not just to say I have it, but the time savings that are sometimes hard to quantify. So I think that certainly helps. So, investing in the business, equipment, software, I think those are pretty solid ones. I mean, again, you don't have to have a company handbook that's this thick, but have a position description for each for my yard person, for my service tech, whatever it is. And again, it helps your business, but at the same time, when I have clients that I can walk in and they just hand it all out to you, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a whole lot easier and fun. And again, it kind of goes to that story that you're buying an ongoing concern. You're not buying a fixer-upper, right? There's those out there too. There's fixer-upper businesses, just like there's fixer-upper houses, and that's okay. There's homes for them. We sell them too. We just find the right buyer, and we don't portray it for anything more or less than it is. So I think that kind of hits a fair number of what to do to just make your bid and growth. Try to have some growth. When the graphs are going up and to the right for sales and earnings, it always helps. Right?
Yes.
Your next question may be, what could hurt a valuation, and it's, if the sales are going down, and we've seen those too, and we can get to that in a minute, but I'll have you any follow-ups with the positives, or how's that?
Yeah, it's great. I think if you were to walk into a business and ask the owner or the ops manager, hey, tell me about this, and they can rattle off details without, I'm not sure, or if you get a lot of those things about their financials, about their process, about what they're seeing, using tools to help you see those trends in your business, like that's going to make a world of difference versus someone that has reams of paper behind them and they don't understand their process. So I think it's pretty clear that if you have a good business, and then I think also the culture probably plays in that too. You could feel it walking into a business if the people there that you may be buying, that business that come along with it, you want them to be happy. So if that's already in place, you're not looking uphill for buying that business. So, all right, yeah, let's switch to the cons part, because I think that no judgment zone here, but people do things with their business and they put things on the books that maybe they should think about taking off before selling that business. And can you talk about some of the cons that people can clean up?
Of course. I want to mention one more thing before we jump onto that, in my 20 years in this business, I have seen the sanitation industry get more and more professional every year over the past 10 years, and pricing integrity, raising rates for the past 10 years. It's been very encouraging. So I think that's why some of the private equity and individual investors are getting on board with our industry. So I just wanted to say that, and again, a plug for the Portable Sanitation Association, that I think they've played a real role in that. And if you're not a PSAI member, you really need to look into that, because there's tremendous value to membership and what they bring. So, I think that's helped our industry, and I want to make sure I mention that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so moving on to what may not make my business as potentially valuable as it could be. I'll throw a couple out there, and I think putting all your eggs in one basket, we've all heard that. If you are a company that focuses solely on residential home builders, that may be great for you, and you may have tremendous success, but lack of diversity in your revenue is going to make a potential buyer leery, or maybe not pay up to the highest multiple for your company, because they want a sustainable business that has some diversity in the revenue. So what I would say is take a look at your client list. And a lot of times you're so busy running your business, you don't have time to do that. But and you could even, there's plenty of consultants in our industry. My company, FMC Advisors, does the same thing. But look at your revenue. If you're all commercial construction, sprinkle some events or some residential construction or industrial or agriculture in there, because the buyer wants to see some diversity. Now, it doesn't have to be 10% of 10 different segments, but I think you want to have some diversity. So number one, I would say don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that's from a market segment standpoint. You also want to look at your top 10. What percentage of my revenue is generated by my top 10 customers? And maybe maybe you never look at that. I think you should. And I think there's, depending on the size of your business, I wouldn't want more than 50% of my work coming from 10 clients. I'd like to see it as a buyer less than 33%. Now, again, it's fine to have large, very profitable clients, absolutely. But I just think taking a look at that, there are times when that can be detrimental to your multiple. So I think that from a revenue standpoint. Number two is equipment. If you have older equipment that has not been maintained, a buyer's going to say, what do I have to spend in my first year of ownership if I buy this company? If you're running 10 trucks and I have to replace 5 in year one, that's $135,000 per truck. So they've got to spend what, $650,000 on trucks in year one? That's basically going to be a deduction from your purchase price, because they know in year one they have to go and spend a boatload of money. So it kind of goes back to spending as much as you can fiscally responsibly on equipment. So if you've got a fleet, and I've seen these, not so much anymore, we've had some good years, but for a long time, I would look at a company, and 2007 Internationals were the last trucks they bought, because that was right before the global financial crisis, and they had doctored them along. Now we're 15 years removed from that, so it's not that bad, but look at your equipment. The rolling stock, for sure. You can change out your portable restrooms. It's not as important as your rolling stock, because that's the high dollar, and that's the high cost item. So I think those two things, looking at where your revenue is coming from, making sure that, now again, I'll throw a caveat here, because if you knew you were going to sell in 3 years, maybe you run that equipment right up to that last day, and you say, I know I'm not going to get the most for my company. And the way I kind of tell people is, sometimes when you sell your company, it's not the entire ice cream sundae at the end of dinner. It's just the cherry on top of the sundae. Your business has made you money over the years. It may not be that windfall at the end that you thought it was going to be, but it's going to be something, right? Now, there are larger operators where it is a windfall. It can be, not just the Sunday, but whole Thanksgiving dinner and the trip to, wherever we go. So I think, there's a couple things there that I would look at if I'm an operator that could lower my valuation.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really great conversation. Last thoughts that you want to leave our audience with that maybe both on the buying and the selling side. What do you want them to take away?
That just have a plan, right? Whether it's selling in the next 12 months or the next 3 to 5 years, understand that it's a process, and the average company in the United States can take up to a year to sell. We haven't seen that in the portable sanitation industry. Transactions have taken a shorter time, the ones that I'm been a part of, but just have a plan there, on the sell side, and the same on the buy side. And don't be afraid to reach out to consultants in the industry. There's a lot in our industry that know what they're talking about. Consultations are always free with my company, and it's just good to talk to people in the industry. So network with other people. I see it in the Facebook groups. I see it in the PSAI. So, I just think that don't be afraid to reach out. There's no silly questions. There's just opportunities.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Damon. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I know our audience got a lot out of it.
Well, same here, Matt. I really appreciate what Service Corps is doing. So, again, thank you again for the opportunity.